Hello and welcome to a demonstration on using the middleware Morgan for Express, specifically with HTTP real-time logging. So what is Morgan? It is an Express middleware, as I said, that does HTTP logging in real time. It allows you to make custom tokens for that logging and generate the information you want out of user logins, requests, and the like. It can generate real-time logs, which is very, very helpful since if your server crashes during a session, oftentimes your logging only happens once a user is done. This happens immediately on request, so we can preserve some of that information that would have been lost during a server crash or the like. This is a very useful tool to help us maintain continuity in the case of disaster. It can also do a lot of like real-time authentication and data gathering since we're grabbing this information on login and on request. We're going to dive into what that looks like, how to generate logs like this one, and maybe something that looks a little bit nicer for you as well. We're going to talk about all the different ways that you can use this Morgan middleware. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's dive into some code here. I have a base project that I'm going to talk about here. It is extremely simple, but we're going to look at installing Morgan and getting Morgan up and running. What I have right now is just your basic Express. So you can see I am importing Express. I'm running on port 3000 by force. I'm just requiring this extra file here, logging, and we are going to use this API version 1 as our base. Instead of index.html or anything like that, this is going to be sort of our base pass using this logs. And then, of course, we've got the app listening on the port. And then over here, we have just a simple get and post method that just send a message, right? They just send a message. They don't do anything right now. Let's dive into doing Morgan. So the very first thing we need to do is we need to install Morgan. So the way you do that is npm install Morgan, nice and simple. And whenever you do one of those, I always like to make sure that my middleware has been installed appropriately, and you can go ahead and look at your package.json, and I can see, yes, Morgan is here and installed. So that's always a good thing to take a look at. Okay, so we want to use Morgan. Another thing you're going to do whenever you use things like this is you are going to define them. So we need to require Morgan. And then we're going to use Morgan, and we're going to use it in this kind of a weird way first to show you what it's doing, and then we'll use it more globally. So right now I'm going to dive into specifically the get method. I'm going to add it as an argument to the get method. And Morgan, as a function here, takes in a couple of different parameters. And you can see here are some of those parameters that Visual Studios is generating for me. And that's really cool. So we are going to start with combine, but let's take a look over at the docs to see what those are. So here's the Morgan Express JavaScript documentation, right? No one really likes reading through documentation. This is not the most helpful documentation, but it did get me there. So you can see they're talking about what you use Morgan for and all of your arguments here. You've got lots of different things you can do, and this is where we're talking combined, comment, dev, all of those ones we saw. And here's sort of the format. So we're going to start with combined. It's this longest format. There's a couple other smaller formats, and then we're also going to look at the smallest, tiny, to see what gets reported. And so we've got this going. It's doing the combine. Everything's good to go. We're going to make a request on that right now. We need to actually get our server running here. Now I'm using NodeMon. You can use whatever you want to actually get it running. I like NodeMon because it live updates. Super useful. So my server is running. And if I do my get request here, should say get a log. Nothing happens here, but here in the console, you can see that combined log. So this is that format that the documents we're talking about. We can see all kinds of different information, and if we want to recall, what are we actually looking at here? So we've got remote address, remote user, data, method, URL, status, res, references, user agent. A lot of information all here in that log immediately stored. And if I come back to our code, I can change this format to say tiny, send a new request, Insomnia is not liking me today. There we go. We sent a new request, so you can see I closed the server, reopened it here, and here is our new tiny request, and we can see that a little bit more live. And we can see the amount of time it's taking, the URL, and the HTTP method we're using, which is get. This is a nice, quick, easy live log that took us one line of code to actually generate after our backend. Now this is kind of ugly, right? We don't want to do it just inside of one function. Typically, we're going to want to do logging across the board. So we're going to go ahead and take this out, and we're going to move it to our full app. If I take it and I use it over here, we're going to be able to do a lot more with this application. And we're also going to take a look at tokens afterwards. But let's start with just live logging the whole thing. We can do app.use Morgan. And inside those docs, you're going to learn about this little command string. And what it is there's some default things that you can ask for in your log. And we're going to ask for URL and the method. And we're going to do it in this order. You can do it in any order you want. These are base built in from the documents. There's a couple others that you can use that you saw with like combined. But these are the ones that I'm interested in, right? I want to know what URL was the user asking for and by what method was it being asked for in HTTP. And with just this line right here, if I relaunch my server, I grab Insomnia, I do a get, and we can see that get request is sent in, and now I can do post requests as well. Before, I wouldn't have been able to do this post. We could do all kinds of other ones as well, but these are the two that we actually have implemented, so that's the only two we're going to take a look at. There's our live log. Now, this doesn't seem super useful until you learn all of the little bells and whistles. So we're going to do one more thing here. We're going to talk about tokens. So if we go over to the document, tokens are anything we want. We can make a custom token and have it return pieces of our request. And that is exactly what we're going to do here. And that just takes this Morgan.token argument. Here, you're going to define what you want. It can be anything. Just make sure this name matches. And then it takes a function and we're going to return the headers of our request here. And so we're going to format them, they're JSON, so stringify, so that they're nice, pretty printed, rec.headers. There we go. And right now this would do nothing because we haven't actually used header, but we've defined this custom thing, and now we can just use a colon, the custom definition, our tokens definition, or declaration, and now it'll actually print that information when I make my request. So again, we're going to get our server restarted. We're going to make a post request, and we're sending in a JSON, but we're not actually going to print this. This is our body, right? We're going to print our headers. And so we'll see that over here. So this is our header, not our body, but you could have changed everything here. You could do rec.body and print the same thing, but then you'd get your body. I didn't want to do too much with that because in order to send that body request, I would have to format a lot of Insomnia, and I don't expect you to know Insomnia in order to be able to do this yourself. Again, we're doing a really simple demo and tutorial, but there's lots more that you can do once you get into that advanced state. You can also see that in my header, I am throwing some information. So if I look at my header, I have this authorization 123. You can specifically grab information like that from the request, from this live log, and use it in the rest of your application. These tokens are very powerful. So that is Morgan in a nutshell. You've got tokens, you've got live logging. You can do a lot with just those few tools, gaining access to HTTP commands. Until next time, keep coding.